The day I locked my new gate, she came pounding on it like I had stolen something from her. And in a way, I guess I had. Because for nearly 10 years, the HOA's favorite Karen had been using my land as her personal shortcut. The only problem? She never realized it was private property until I bought all 60 acres and shut it down overnight. When I bought the 60 acres just outside Cedar Hollow Estates, I thought I was buying peace. That was the whole point. I had spent years living too close to too many people, listening to leaf blowers at 7 a.m., dogs barking through fences, and neighbors who somehow always knew exactly when to appear the second I wanted to be left alone. So when I found a stretch of rolling land with old oak trees, a pond, and a gravel service lane cutting through the far edge, I didn't hesitate. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. No HOA, no board meetings, no fake smiles, just enough space to disappear from everybody for a while, or at least that was the plan. Cedar Hollow Estate sat right next to the southern edge of my property, separated mostly by tree lines and one worn strip of dirt that curved behind a row of decorative fencing, crossed part of my back acreage, and reconnected to a county road on the other side. The realtor mentioned it casually during closing. "Old access path," she said. "Previous owner let a few locals use it now and then." That should have been my first warning, because a few locals turned out to mean half the people in Cedar Hollow had quietly decided that this dirt lane on someone else's land was their personal traffic hack. They used it to skip the long entrance loop at the front of the neighborhood, avoid the stop sign near the elementary school, and shave maybe 3 minutes off their morning commute. 3 whole minutes. Apparently, that was worth years of trespassing. I didn't even know how bad it was until my second weekend there. I was out near the barn foundation checking a water line when I heard a car engine where there definitely shouldn't have been one. Then another. Then another. I walked up the rise and just stood there watching in disbelief as an SUV rolled through my property like it was a public road. Right behind it came a golf cart, then a pickup truck. Nobody slowed down. Nobody looked confused. They all drove like this had been normal forever. I flagged down the pickup and asked the driver if he was lost. The guy looked annoyed, not embarrassed. "No, I'm cutting through," he said, like that explained everything. I told him he was on private property. He laughed and said, "Everybody uses this road." Then he kept driving. That was my first lesson about Cedar Hollow. When people get used to stealing convenience, they stop seeing it as theft. They start calling it normal. The next few days, I paid closer attention. Sure enough, there was a steady little parade of residents using the lane. SUVs in the morning, delivery vans in the afternoon, joggers, golf carts, even a woman in a Lexus who had the nerve to honk at me because I was standing near her route while unloading fence posts. That woman turned out to be Karen. Not literally named Karen, of course, but spiritually, absolutely. Her real name was Denise, and I learned that from the moment she marched onto my driveway without asking, sunglasses on, mouth already set in complaint mode. "Hi," she said, except it wasn't really a greeting. "I'm Denise from Cedar Hollow HOA. I told her my name. She ignored that and pointed toward the back acreage. "You can't block that lane," she said. "Residents use it." I remember blinking at her because I thought I had misheard. "You mean the lane on my property?" She folded her arms. "It's been used for years." I said, "So has my kitchen, but that doesn't make it community property." She didn't like that. She immediately shifted into that HOA tone, you know the one, where every sentence sounds like it should end with a fine. She said the lane was functionally part of neighborhood flow, and that closing it would negatively impact resident access efficiency. I actually laughed. "Efficiency?" I said. "You're talking about trespassing with a time-saving excuse." That's when her whole face changed. She wasn't used to being talked to like a normal person. She was used to people folding the second she mentioned the HOA. I wasn't one of those people. I told her I'd be putting up fencing and a gate within the month and suggested she let her residents know. She stared at me like I'd threatened civilization. "You're going to regret starting a war with this neighborhood," she said. That line would have been funny if it hadn't come from a woman standing on my gravel while wearing tennis whites at 10:30 on a Tuesday. I should say this clearly. I didn't buy the land to start problems. I wasn't trying to inconvenience anyone. But I also wasn't going to let an entire subdivision keep treating my acreage like an unofficial bypass just because the previous owner was too tired to stop them. So I did what any sane landowner would do. I ordered a survey refresh, had the property corners remarked, and brought in a fencing crew. That's when the HOA really lost it. The first sign of trouble was petty. Survey flags started disappearing. Then a stack of T-posts I'd had delivered got mysteriously knocked over. One morning, I found tire tracks cut across a freshly staked section of my field, like someone had gone out of their way to prove a point. I installed trail cameras that same day. Within 48 hours, I had footage of 3 different Cedar Hollow residents driving around my markers instead of respecting them. One of them was Denise, in a golf cart, at dusk, holding what looked suspiciously like pruning shears. The woman was literally trimming my boundary ribbons off low brush like she was helping herself tidy up a public park. I saved every clip, didn't say a word. The more entitled people get, the easier they are to document. Construction on the gate started the following week. It wasn't some dramatic fortress setup, just a solid steel ranch gate across the lane with cedar posts, reflective markers, and a proper lockbox for service access. Clean, legal, and completely on my land. I also posted signs every 50 feet. Private property, no through traffic, no trespassing. The day the gate went up, I barely had time to admire it before the show started. First came the horn honking, then the U-turns. Then, around 5:40 p.m., Denise herself rolled up in that same Lexus and slammed on the brakes like she'd found a body. She got out so fast I thought she might actually charge the gate. Instead, she stormed up to it and started shaking it with both hands. I was about 30 yards away near the fence line, and when she spotted me, she pointed like I had personally ruined her life. "Open this right now," she yelled. "No," I said. "This is illegal," she shouted. "No," I said again. "It's private property." She launched into a speech about community access, historical use, emergency convenience, school drop-off efficiency, and something about how everyone agreed this was fine years ago. I let her burn through all of it before saying the one thing that really got under her skin. "That sounds like a problem for people who don't own this road." I thought she might explode. Over the next week, Cedar Hollow residents acted like I had closed a public interstate. People started posting in the neighborhood Facebook group about me. Yes, I got screenshots. According to them, I was a hostile outsider, a land hoarder, and my personal favorite, anti-community. One woman claimed I had endangered children by adding 3 minutes to the route to soccer practice. Another guy wrote that my gate was economic aggression. That one still makes me laugh. Economic aggression. Because apparently the inability to cut illegally across a stranger's field is now oppression. Denise, of course, escalated everything. She started calling the county, then the sheriff's office, then code enforcement, then, for reasons I still don't understand, animal control. I guess she was hoping one of them would magically find a rule that said she could keep using my land if she was annoying enough. They didn't. Every time an official showed up, I walked them through the survey, the deed, the posted signage, and the camera footage of repeated trespassing. Every single one left with the same conclusion. It was my property, my gate, my right. That should have ended it. It didn't. Because Karen-level entitlement doesn't die when it loses. It gets creative. About 2 weeks after the gate went up, I woke up to find the chain hanging loose and the latch bent. Somebody had tried to force it during the night. They hadn't succeeded, but they damaged the hardware enough to make their point. I checked the cameras. At 11:53 p.m., there was Denise again, this time with another resident I later learned was on the HOA landscaping committee. They pulled up in a golf cart, got out with a flashlight, and spent 6 full minutes yanking on my gate like raccoons trying to open a cooler. At one point, Denise actually kicked the lower bar hard enough to hurt herself, which I'll admit brought me a small amount of joy. But the best part was what happened next. Because while they were busy committing the dumbest form of trespass possible, on camera, at night, in a vehicle registered to the HOA landscaping budget, I was already done being patient. I called my attorney the next morning, and by noon, Denise had a formal cease and desist letter, a trespass notice, and still frames from the footage attached. But I didn't stop there. Since Cedar Hollow had spent weeks pretending this lane was some kind of neighborhood necessity, I decided it was time to make one thing very, very clear. I hired a local contractor to begin grading and trench prep along the old shortcut route for a future tree line and utility run. In other words, I started converting the shortcut into exactly what it had always been, part of my land. No drivable surface, no ambiguity, just a clearly active private improvement zone. Dirt piles, markers, drainage sleeves, the works. You would have thought I'd bulldozed their clubhouse. Denise showed up again, this time red-faced and practically vibrating. "You can't destroy that road!" she yelled from behind the fence. I said, "There was never a road. There was just a habit." That line hit her like a brick. She started screaming about emergency vehicles and legal easements and community rights. So I asked her one simple question. "Can you show me a recorded easement?" She went dead quiet for half a second, the first intelligent pause I'd seen from her in a month. Because that was the thing. There wasn't one. I had already checked, thoroughly. The lane had been used casually for years, sure, but nobody had ever bothered to formalize it. No easement, no right-of-way, no maintenance agreement. Just entitlement with tire tracks. And once Denise realized I knew that, her whole strategy collapsed. She couldn't threaten me with documents she didn't have. She couldn't bully me with authority that didn't exist. All she had left was outrage, so she used it. She called a special HOA community safety meeting and invited county staff, hoping public pressure would force me to reopen the shortcut. I almost didn't go, but then I thought about how much fun it might be to watch this fall apart in person. So I went. The meeting was held in the Cedar Hollow clubhouse, and the second I walked in, I could feel the room tense up. Denise stood near the front with a stack of printed maps like she was about to prosecute me for crimes against convenience. She started with a dramatic speech about historic access patterns and shared regional usage expectations. It was nonsense wrapped in PowerPoint. Then she invited the county planner to comment. The planner, who I had already met twice, looked mildly exhausted and said very simply, "There is no recorded public access right across Mr. Carter's parcel." The room changed instantly. Denise tried to interrupt. He kept going. "The lane in question is private property. Any prior informal use does not create automatic access rights." I wish I could tell you I stayed humble in that moment. I did not. I leaned back in my chair and enjoyed every second. Residents started whispering. One man in the back actually said, "Wait, we've all just been cutting through someone's land?" "Yes, Brad. Congratulations. You have discovered trespassing." Denise tried one last Hail Mary by claiming the lane had become essential to neighborhood function. That's when I stood up and said, "If your neighborhood function depends on unauthorized use of someone else's property, then your problem isn't my gate. It's your planning." That was it. Meeting over. She had no answer. The weeks after that were weirdly quiet. No more Facebook essays, no more fake complaints, no more midnight gate attacks. Cedar Hollow residents adapted like normal adults the second they realized they had no leverage. Their morning commute got 3 minutes longer, and somehow civilization survived. But Denise never really recovered. Every now and then, I'd catch her stopped at the front of the gate in her Lexus, just staring at it like it had personally betrayed her. And honestly, in her mind, it probably had. Because to people like that, boundaries feel offensive. They only like private property when it belongs to them. These days, the gate stays locked, the fence line is clean, and the old shortcut is gone for good. In its place is a row of young cedar trees, a drainage swale, and a utility corridor that actually serves my land instead of someone else's laziness. Sometimes when I'm out there at sunset, I'll hear distant traffic coming from Cedar Hollow's official entrance and just smile to myself. Not because I enjoy making people drive farther, but because there's something deeply satisfying about taking away a privilege people got so comfortable abusing that they started calling it a right. Denise thought my gate ruined her life. It didn't. It just forced her to live by the same rules the rest of us do. And apparently for an HOA Karen, that feels like tragedy. So tell me, if your new property came with a bunch of entitled neighbors using it as their personal shortcut, would you have locked it down too? Drop your opinion in the comments, and subscribe for more HOA revenge and entitled neighbor stories.